The topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
Hello and welcome to Fearless Fabulous You. I am your host, Melania, and it's a gorgeous August 2026 day here where I am in my studio. And I hope you have been enjoying the summer. You know what August means? August means for many parents and students back to school. Do you remember those days? I do. I remember particularly grammar school and high school, less so college, just being so excited. My mother and I would pick out for grammar school my school wardrobe, my back to school wardrobe, because we could wear whatever we wanted. Later in junior high and high school, I wore uniforms, and I had those uniforms nicely pressed and ready to go. And it was always so exciting. And I love seeing all my friends. I missed them over the summer. We shared, swapped notes. Do you remember that? Or were you the other type who was a little nervous about going back to school? Were you nervous about maybe you were starting a new school? Maybe you didn't have such a great summer. Maybe you had things happen and you were nervous. Maybe you were just nervous because it's kind of scary going back to school these days. It's a different environment, right? But here's the thing. It's not just you, the students. Teachers can be nervous about going back to school too. Let's think about that. Teachers nowadays, educators, teachers, are facing more challenges and stress than ever as leaders of their classroom. In fact, according to the National Education Association, stress and exhaustion is pushing many teachers out of the profession. In 2025, research at the University of Missouri released a study in which they surveyed about 500 public school teachers. They found that 78% had thought about quitting their profession since the pandemic. The reasons? A lack of administrative support, inadequate compensation, and challenging student behavior, much less the fear of school shootings, which there's been like 99 school shootings this year since June, and other challenges. So, burnout among teachers is something we don't want to have, but it's a fact. And we're going to talk about it today. And we're going to talk about it in a bigger context because my guest today is a teacher who says she was running on empty. She was a music teacher and she was running on empty. She was facing burnout and she took steps to address it. And from that created a program, a business and a program called the Empowered Educator to help other teachers avoid burnout. But I want to say to you that this is not just about teachers. It's about many careers. I just had a text-a-thon with a friend who said, I'm experiencing burnout. And she is in the special events industry. I experienced career burnout after 30 years in special events and public relations. I just was done, and it impacted my health, and I couldn't go back. So burnout is real among many professions, and particularly among women who seem to carry the weight of running a home, running a business, or having a job, and juggling a lot, and they put their self-care last. I did, many did, and our guest did too. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it in the context of what she's doing to help teachers, because frankly, if you are a parent or a grandparent, you should be honoring your teachers because they really are taking care of your kids most of the day and preparing them for their future. So my guest, who is she? She's Dr. Jen Rafferty. The doctor is a PhD, which we'll talk about. She has a very interesting background as a vocal teacher and music teacher. And as I said, was in the system as a teacher. And then in 2020 said, I got to do something. She is author of a book called The Empowered Educator. We'll put a book cover up right here as we bring her on. And she also has a website called theempowerededucator.com, which has helped a lot of teachers as well as leaders of schools and people who manage teachers to help them deal with these realities. So Dr. Jen Rafferty, welcome to Fearless Fabulous You.
Hi, it's good to be here.
I had to say, I commented on that beautiful mural behind you. Give a shout out to your friend who created it for you.
Oh, yes. This is by the incredible Molly Reagan at Good Neighbor Art, and she does fabulous work everywhere she goes.
Well, it's very cool. I love it. So welcome. I always like to start with, who is Jen Rafferty? Who is she? What was she like as a young girl? When did she decide she wanted to be a teacher? What was her path?
I'm so glad you asked me that question, because so much of this journey for me has been to discover, uncover, reconnect with just Jen underneath all of the roles. So, I am still very much asking myself that question. So today, I'm coming to you in context of someone who truly wanted to be a teacher her whole life. I was a theater kid growing up. I loved performing. The family lore is that I would always take all of my stuffed animals and set them up on the couch and sing and dance for them. And as I got older, my music teachers were actually one of the most influential people in my life, because they showed me that not only could this craft, but more importantly, I could share it with others and teach other people how to connect with that inherent part of themselves. So many of us grow up not thinking and believing we're musical, which is maybe a conversation for another day. But for me, if you can talk, you can sing, and you can make music. Everybody has that deep, deep within us. And so I felt it was really important for me to teach kids how to do this and to establish a connection with music making early on. So my career started as mostly a middle school teacher. I love middle school. And I taught choir. I taught general music. I started a modern band in my program that I was teaching at in Central New York. And I absolutely loved it. There was something really special about seeing these kids light up and feeling that inspiration that I felt when I was their age. And so that took me on this journey of teaching. And I really believed that I would be teaching my entire career. But as you said, 2020, everything kind of changed, and we can get to that in a minute if you want. But that at the core, I really believe that I want to inspire people to discover their voice just like I did.
Well, I think teaching is a calling. I think many careers are calling, but particularly teaching, because it requires a level of education and dedication. What is your PhD in?
My PhD is in educational psychology. So I have my undergraduate degree actually in vocal performance and music education. So I studied classical singing in college at Ithaca. And then I went on to get my music education degree as my master's, and then started my PhD during COVID, actually, in educational psychology.
Well, education is important. My mother was a longtime educator. She earned her master's in psychology. And when I was a very little girl, going to night school, where in the meantime, she taught special needs, very extreme special needs, the deaf children who were deaf. And she studied theater and communications and in Sophie Newcomb College. And much later in life, after she had burnout from working in this is a clinical psychologist, where children from the mountains and like the country people would come in, and many of them sadly were victims of incest. And at one point she said, I can't do this anymore. I'm testing children that are severely, had mental challenges, were retarded. I hate that word, but they had mental disabilities due to what happened to them. And she left the profession and soul searched for a while, but she was drawn back into her calling, which was teaching, and became an adjunct professor for many years at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga in the theater department, teaching public speaking.
Wow.
So your story resonates, because many people think theater, arts, music, public, it's not important. You know what it is? Because it makes students better It builds confidence. It builds inquisitiveness and a curiosity and an ability to communicate in a different way. And I live in New Orleans, so music teaching is godlike here. It's royalty, music teachers.
Yeah. Yes. I think that is a really good point. A lot of the theater, music, arts departments are unfortunately some of the first to go when it comes to budget cuts.
Yeah.
But truly that creativity and that ingenuity, that innovation that's fostered in those courses are essential for anything that you do. Even if you go on to be in the medical profession or in a STEM career, that creative component and that foundation is absolutely necessary. And that's not even talking about the confidence that you gain, especially from theater, speaking and improvising. Even doing something like a podcast like this is a form of improv, right? I mean, we're kind of ping-ponging back and forth. I don't know what you're going to ask me. And, how do you want to show up? Those skills are essential, I think, now, especially as, we could go here if you'd like, but maybe this is also another conversation for another day. But with the rise of AI, we've never been forced to ask ourselves what makes us uniquely human and what can we do and bring to the table. And I truly believe that the arts and our connection to our own emotional intelligence and fostering those skills to create human connection is what we get to do best. And the arts sets the foundation for all of that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it just kills me when funding for the arts is cut first. It just kills me. And, everybody out there, stand up for it because this is your community. Build something. If it's cut in the schools, build it in the community. Yeah. So you had success and then COVID hits. And you had obviously a come to terms with your life I assume during COVID when you're teaching? You tell me what was happening because I don't want to put words in your mouth. What was happening during COVID where you were like, because I think a lot of people felt this.
They sure did. There was some other kind of special sauce, I think, happening at my house too. So in December of 2019, I was really just at the height of my career. I just received a Teacher of the Year award from my school district. I had another regional Apple for the Teacher award. I mean, and from the outside, it totally looked like I was killing it. And I just published my first book that was specifically for music teachers in December of 2019. And right before Christmas that year, my husband and I decided we were going to get a divorce. Yeah. And I ended up moving out of my house with my kids who were 5 and 7 at the time, the same weekend the world shut down in March of 2020.
Where'd you move?
Just a couple blocks down the road, but out of my house.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was just one of those things where everything I thought I was the day before, I felt all of a sudden I wasn't. So actually, when you asked me that first question of who's Jen, I really had to uncover that. And that's when that journey started for me kind of explicitly. So I was no longer living in my house. I was no longer a wife. I was no longer teaching kids the way that I was used to. Singing itself was considered very dangerous in those early days of COVID. And I had to have this reckoning of who am I? And then who did I want to be? And then how do I bridge the two to get there? So I ended up staying home for what I thought would just be a semester, fall of 2020, to homeschool my kids. That's when I started my PhD. And I remember my very first class, my professor said, all right, introduce yourself. And everybody was introducing themselves in relation to their partner, in relation to their job, or in relation to their kids. And while I was still a mom, I didn't want to lead with that. And I remember just sobbing, Melanie, at my computer, thinking to myself, who am I? And I had to get honest with myself that everything that I thought I was were defined by these roles that I was playing. And I got an opportunity. It didn't feel great at the time, but looking back, I had this beautiful opportunity to uncover who was I when I wasn't any of those things. So I ended up going deep into more of the research of cognitive neuroscience, which I had already been studying my whole career. Since I was teaching adolescent students, I was really interested in adolescent brains. And I learned during that time, all right, I have a brain too. This is interesting information for me. I got a certification in emotional intelligence as a practitioner, and then continued to study neuroidentity evolution and realized teachers need this information. Teacher burnout wasn't anything new, but we couldn't ignore it anymore during that time. And that's when I decided to resign from a job that I loved. And in the spring of 2021, I opened up my company, Empowered Educator.
So you taught during COVID, so you were teaching via Zoom, right?
Yeah. So I taught through June of 2020, and then I took off for, yes. So I was actually not teaching during the crux of COVID. I was on my own healing journey, supporting my own kids in their schooling and doing the homeschool thing and starting a business from my dining room table.
Yeah, so many people did.
Yes, they sure did.
So when you started the Empowered Educator, what was your initial goal and where have you taken it now? Give us some examples.
Yeah, so the goal was actually the same as what my goal was when I was in the classroom. When I was in the classroom, as I shared earlier, my mission was to inspire people, especially kids, to discover their voice. And during COVID especially, it felt like teachers had their hands tied behind their backs, and more publicly than I think than before. It's not like that didn't happen before. And they felt voiceless and like they didn't have agency. There were so many things happening. There still are so many things happening that are completely out of their control, that it was important to me to remind people, show people, just like how I was learning myself, how to remember their agency and essentially discover their voice. So what I did at the start was inspire people to discover their voice, but in a slightly different way. And so teaching teachers the skills of high-level mindset work and emotional intelligence and applied neuroscience allowed them to lean into their biology, lean into understanding what the purpose of stress and anxiety was and how to work with it instead of against it. And that allowed them to show up better, not just for themselves and their families, but for their students who needed them more than ever. And they still do. So the mission of the company hasn't changed at all. Actually, I think what's changed is the ways in which we're able to reach more people and to get this material as accessible as possible.
I think this is a really important time. You mentioned the impact AI is having on education, good and bad, which is one thing. Technology. We have more distracted students. Students have a mental health crisis going on at extraordinary levels, and that puts more pressure and burden on the teachers, because you think about it, teachers have 9 hours often a day with students, but the work doesn't end then because you're grading papers, you're preparing for classes. As I read through your book and thought about watching my mother doing what she did, it reminded me a lot of my profession in public relations and events, where it never ended. The day never ended. I was always monitoring the media. I was always looking for the story. You could never stop. And teaching is the same way. So as I said before, even though your program is for teachers, it's applicable in many ways. And I have a broad audience, women, many of whom have experienced burnout or maybe experiencing it. Like I said, I was texting with somebody this morning. In your own journey to find the new you, because I do think it's an interesting, I've actually been in that position, Jen, where I'll be in a room. I was a couple weeks ago with like-minded ladies in New Orleans. It was a networking and somebody begged me to go. And somebody said, well, what do you do? And I didn't really know how to answer that. I answered it one way. And the woman's like, well, everybody has podcasts now. Like, oh, well, I guess that's not special. And then I was like, what's my specialness? What's my special me, you? And you had to find that as well. And a lot of people don't know that because we're never the same person decades and decades later. We are allowed to change. How did you find the new you?
I love that question. I feel like the new you, the new me, gets to reappear every day. I don't know that there is a moment anymore since doing this work, because I am a practitioner of this work. I don't just teach it. I walk the walk. I practice everything I share. I don't know that there's ever a moment anymore where I don't recognize the impermanence of everything, where who I am now is going to be different than who I am even after we have this conversation, because just by the nature of us connecting and having this conversation, we're both walking away changed. And so I get to have this beautiful opportunity now to accept impermanence, knowing that everything is temporary. And I'm excited about what that means. I think where so many of us get stuck is we hold very closely onto the things that we do. Like you said, so often when we're in these small talk conversations, like, oh, what do you do? That becomes our defining moment. And I have played around with even how to answer that question. I do a lot of things is often my answer. Can you be more specific? And that turns into a really disarming way of having a connected conversation instead of some small talk, because I'm not really interested in that anymore. Because for me, I've gone through this journey of accepting that. And so that excites me, Melanie, that I get to be a different version of myself every day just by the nature of my experiences.
I completely agree. I actually think what you do is a terrible conversation starter.
Yeah, I think people don't know. And at the end of the day, right, we're not human doings, we're human beings. Right. Yeah. And so in that aspect, I think kind of breaking that ice of, can you be more specific so is often a way to really connect with someone.
I agree. I have I'm going to do a show on conversation starters after that, because I actually fumbled a little bit and here I am. Why would I be fumbling? But you do, because we evolve. Yeah. So, we're back to school. And I talked about how it's going to be stressful for students, but it's also for teachers. And how did you deal with it, and how do you help people do it? Because, and the news media doesn't help, because we cover everything, not we, but the news media does tend to look for the sensational part of something versus the substantive sometimes. And I love the media, but that's the truth, because it comes down to the numbers. How do you help teachers when they start that next year, and maybe they're like, oh, I got to do this again. You got to get into that right head. And who are these students going to be? And which one's going to be the problem ones? And which ones are going to be the good ones? And what do I do if one of them becomes difficult? How do you help them? Because you don't know your students every year. It's a whole other class.
Yes, it's one of the only professions where you have a whole new job every single year. It's a brand new job. And so there are a couple of things. The first one I always share is lead with grace for yourself. This is a huge transition. And so is, I need to say, the transition from the school year to summer. It's like you're going on this speedboat and all of a sudden it's June and the speedboat stops. But the wakes of the water don't stop. And by the time they settle in, it's already August, and now you're going back to school and you're picking it up again. And so allowing yourself the grace to, give yourself a little bit of flexibility. Don't be so hard on yourself when you're struggling to get up again at 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning. Give yourself extra rest, give yourself extra nourishment. Ask yourself, what do I need right now? That is a question, especially as educators, especially educators who are also women, especially as educators who are also moms. That is hardly ever a question that we ask. What do I need right now? Because our focus is all the time on all of the other people's needs. And especially during the transition back to school, it's so easy to focus on what everyone else needs. And at the end of the day, you are the variable. Everything that's happening is going to pass through you. So your needs are actually really important. So I always say here, and this is kind of the foundation that we do in Empowered Educator, the most generous thing you can do for your students is take care of yourself. And that requires giving yourself permission to ask yourself, what do I need? And then act on that.
Because we don't need the teacher to get sick. So the teacher doesn't need to call in sick, but if you need to, do it. Don't be a hero or heroine as well. A lot of people say teachers are not getting the support they need. Their compensation is inadequate. Agree. Administrative is inadequate. Agree. Here in Louisiana, there was just news about this and how we need to do more to develop programs to support teachers. Many of them have to go out and buy extra materials for out of their own pocket, which just kills me. What has to happen from an administration standpoint? Obviously, we can't do much about the federal government, but we should. But other than vote, but what can we do at the local and state level? What can we do? Is my first question, and what can schools do to make this a better environment for teachers?
So the system inherently it's broken. It's very broken,
Yes.
And it's really easy to point fingers and kind of shout out into the void of all of the things that needs to change, and absolutely laws and policy needs to change. And we can point fingers at administration too. But what I know to be true after all of my years of being in education and doing the work that I do now, systems and organizations do not change until people change. And the only person that you have any agency in changing is yourself. And so, when I get asked this question a lot, what do we do? What do we tell administrators to do? Do this work, like do the work of self-awareness and self-regulation. Understand that your emotional intelligence skills are the most important flex in that room, because when you start to understand who you are coming into this space, that's when empathy happens. That's when true communication happens. And that's when change really starts to happen, because you can't communicate value by just talking at someone and expecting them to change their mind about something. It doesn't work that way. And inherently, they need to change from the inside out. And so what I always recommend is understand where your agency is and act accordingly, because that's when change starts to happen. It's not this sort of activism. It's like bang down the door. This is kind of like going through the back door and understanding how you're coming to the table and how that can make a humongous ripple effect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's not go to work, it's do the work.
It's do the work, right? It's do the work. 100%. I love that, because so often, especially now, this is an example of this, to just highlight what we're talking about here. There are so many social emotional learning programs, for example, in schools, and we have the language of all of that. But unless the teachers, unless the adults in the spaces are really embodying that information, what we get is the grumpy math teacher teaching a lesson on empathy. It doesn't make any sense. We're telling and teaching the kids about cooperation and responsibility, but they're hearing us snickering and complaining about our colleagues in the corner. There's no congruence. And so we can't just talk about these things. We need to actually embody them. And that's when change will start to happen.
So what can parents do to be better at making sure their kids are being good students? Because that's another challenge.
Huge challenge. And I'm going to circle back to this very same thing is do the work yourself. Part of this too is our kids are surrounded by adults right now who are living in constant states of exhaustion and burnout and overwhelm and frustration. And it doesn't matter what we tell them, they're watching us. They're learning how to be an adult by watching the adults in their lives. And so part of that is parents actually doing the work themselves. And the second part is also establishing a sense of accountability in your kids, establishing responsibility. I was just asked in an interview yesterday about this. And one of an example that I shared is advocating for your child. There's a beautiful opportunity here for you to give your child the language and foster the skills that they can advocate for themselves, giving them an opportunity to feel empowered. So how can parents set their kids up for a school year? Focus on your own needs, because you're going to be a better parent when you ask yourself, what do I need? And then act accordingly. And own some of that accountability. Learning doesn't stop when the bell stops at 3 o'clock. So much of the learning has to happen at home, of that reinforcement of those skills, particularly emotional intelligence skills and just people skills.
It's hard. I'm not a parent, so I can't speak to parenting. I was a daughter, and my mother was a working mother. And, they didn't spend a lot of time with me after school. I was on my own. I just, for whatever reason, was independent and was able to do the work and took on a job and all that because my mother was busy being a teacher elsewhere. And then, being in clinicals, and my dad. So I can't speak to it, but I read, I watch TV shows, I see movies, and I'm like, wow, I would think, I worry that when kids leave school, they're open to so many other forces out there that could take them this way or that way. They're spending, it seems like, an awful lot of time on social media. And that concerns me because it creates artificial reality, not intelligence, but reality. And, parents, if anything, need to be on top of that and really have conversations with their kids, not just hand them something to do. I see little babies, with phones. I'm like, have communication. It goes back to communication and being involved with your kids and their lives and not disengaged. I think that would probably help. I mean, there's, I think a lot of the things that are happening, whether it's a school, the school shootings are scary too. I can't imagine being a teacher right now and having to think, is my school safe? I can't even imagine it. I was in a high rise in New York, and some security officials came in, and we went through a active shooter scenario. And I was like, this is so weird. There's no active shooter, but we're preparing. I think that would just add to the level of stress that is happening in schools today, where now you're not only a school, but you have to be a fortress.
Yes. The stress is incredibly high. The way our biology works, right? When we're in survival mode, we can't perform. We're in protection mode. Yeah. We're not in performance mode. There's no in between. And, in general, just broad strokes, that's what's happening right now. Everybody, the students, the teachers, the administrators, the parents, we are all in this state of survival all of the time. And so how can we possibly be our best selves, learn, connect with each other when our whole nervous system is trying to protect us and keep us insular to make sure that we stay alive? That's our biology. And so much of this work that I do is about moving from that state of survival to that state of safety. And we live in a world where we're just activated all of the time, and that's normal. Yeah. But we want connection, we want peace, we want ease, we want to feel good, and all of that's available, but on the other side of this. And nobody is really talking or teaching the skills of how to get to that other side. So we buy products and we, drink a bottle or two of wine, or we numb out on TikTok all night just to get that sense of joy. But we know that those things are short-lived, and that really comes from within.
And a lot of the changes have to be made in your home and how you take care of yourself. You're very clear about that. And I've been very clear about that. You got to put your self-care first, because you can't be there for your students, your family, whoever, if you're not there for yourself.
100%.
You have something in the book. I thought it was the Sunday shift. And I like that phrase. A lot of the book, I understand, I read a lot of books about avoiding burnout, and they all have similar messages. But yours was the Sunday shift was a good one, because it's a school night. You always hear, we can't do this. It's a school night. I have friends who still say that. And I'm like, but you're not in school. You're retired. What difference does it make? You don't have a school night. What is the Sunday shift?
So the Sunday shift is really an antidote to the Sunday scaries, that whether you're in education or not, everyone seems to have a taste of what the Sunday scaries are. You're starting a new week. The weekends never seem long enough to reset and recharge the way you want to. And so I created this framework as a way to get very clear, to prioritize just a few minutes to set intentions for the week ahead. And it's, of course, just a really simple acronym. SHIFT stands for sense, which is certainly sensing what your body is telling you right now. Your body talks to you all of the time, but in general, we are terrible listeners. Where is there tightness? Where is there unease or unrest? The next one is honor, just acknowledging that and honor it. So often we just zhuzh it down and we then say to ourselves 3 weeks later, I've had this headache for 3 weeks and I don't know why. And that Sunday shift, you're taking those few minutes to sense what you're feeling and then honoring that. I say, okay, I feel it. What is this trying to tell me right now? What is this headache actually about? I is for integrate, and that's integrating some sort of self-regulation strategy to move from that sense of survival back to that sense of safety so that you can turn on the part of your brain that you need to actually focus, which is the next step, on what you want. How do you intentionally want to feel this week? Just like how we put on clothes in the morning and you decide, I want to wear this shirt and these pants. You get to choose your feelings. And we don't really have that conversation either. How do you want to feel this week is an excellent question. And then the last part is transform, last letter in shift. And the transformation happens with actually doing the thing. How do you get 10% closer to how you want to feel? And then action that. And then even better, call a friend and tell them your action, because that's going to actually give your brain all of that good dopamine and oxytocin and recognition that what you did to transform was something that felt good. And it's going to make it more interesting for your brain to want to do it again. So that's what the shift process is. And every Sunday, it's a really beautiful opportunity to just sit down and be intentional how you want to start your week.
I think it's important. I remember I worked a lot of weekends, so there was never a shift. It was just always work. And then you had to squeeze in your chores. My advice is try to not, I don't like it when my husband's like, we got to do chores this weekend. I don't want my entire weekend to be chores. So I have a chore morning. I chunk my chores. It's like, I don't want to have my entire weekend blown over because I'm working and doing this and this and this. You got to have that shift, also that mental shift, where I just want to do something fun. I mean, give yourself permission to have fun.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, absolutely. And even, I say Sunday shift because of the Sunday scares, but you can do a shift whenever you want, and sometimes it's a Monday shift or a Wednesday shift. But being intentional, and if joy and fun is something that you value and that you want this week, make it intentional. So it's not like an accident when you're having fun and you're not always chasing it.
I hope joy and fun is part of it, because if you're living without joy and fun, it's like really the drag. I mean,
right. What are we doing?
Your job is not full. I mean, I it's sad we're becoming the United States of anxiety because I entered my profession when I did because I thought it was fun and I could make money having fun. And then one day it wasn't fun and I wasn't making the money I used to. And then I'm like, I'm done. And I think with teaching, it's calling. I wish all those people in the 1% would give some of their money to a teaching fund. So teachers had funds, because I think it's a disproportionate income distribution when teachers have so much weight of the world on them that they should be compensated accordingly. I'm a big believer in that. I don't know if that'll ever change, but it needs to. Because many teachers have other jobs. They have other side gigs because they have to do that, which is also stressful, right?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I did. Yeah, sure did.
Yeah. So, it's good that you have a safe place for educators to go to talk to other people who have walked their path. I think it's important. So let's put the book up again, Empowered Educator, and empowereducator.com. I want two things. What is your final message to educators? That's going to be the first. And then I just want you to give a shout out to one or two teachers who meant the most to you in your life.
Oh, sure thing. So I would love to leave people, whether you're in education or not. One of the things I actually have right here on my desk that I look at every day, enough is a decision, not an amount. And you are the only person that gets to decide when it's enough. And that is something that I hold near and dear to my heart. When my brain starts going around, I should be doing this or I should be doing this. It's enough. And I get to decide. And then shout out to some of my most incredible teachers, Carol McCamus, who I think a lot and I talk about in my book. She is one of my mentors still, and a college professor, and another college professor, Keith Kaiser and Deborah Montgomery. They were wonderful and always encouraged me to always ask great questions, which has led me down some beautiful paths.
You got to ask questions. I mean, I'll give a shout out to my mother, who was an educator all over her life and taught me to ask questions. She also taught me to find my own colors and be my true self. She loved the color purple. She was known as the Purple Lady. And everything that I have learned, from embracing the arts to embracing creativity to embracing my unique potential and my uniquely you, came from her. So, and it made me appreciate, my father was a wine educator, which is my other life. And so, and then I will also, my high school teacher, and two teachers, Janet Reed, who was my senior 12th grade teacher, and taught me to find my voice in writing. She believed that I was a beautiful writer, and I'm still in touch with her. And the other was also taught me, Olga Salvater, who was my Spanish teacher, who taught me to embrace language. And I speak several languages now. So I have some wonderful teachers. I stayed in touch with them for many, many years.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Jen Rafferty, thank you for joining me on Fearless, Fabulous You. You have a very compelling story, and you speak to an audience of teachers, but also women who really need to, if you're feeling burnout, if you're feeling the stages of burnout, do something about it.
Yes.
Because you don't want to flame out, and you don't want burnout to dissolve you. You want to emerge from the fire as a stronger person, right?
That's right. Yes, that's it. That's it. Yes, it was great to talk with you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me. Well, I hope everybody has enjoyed the show. Share it with friends, and check out The Empowered Educator. But also, as I said, if you're experiencing symptoms of anxiety and burnout, ask for help, seek help, and maybe take a couple of steps back or sideways, which is what I told my friend today, because it's perfectly okay to say enough. All right. Thank you for joining us. So remember, you have the choice in life on how you want to live. Try to live on your terms and not by terms other people set for you. And always choose fearless and fabulous. Thank you.